let me go now with the second part. As I mentioned previously, linkers is going to be the end of this session. And over here, we're going to master the way of using contrasting sentences and also providing reasons. We're gonna go with only two uses. We're gonna go with contrast and propose.
Purpose.
And the vocabulary that we can use for each. Let's listen to these examples.
2.9. Although I love music, I don't listen to it very often. I don't like to cook. I love to eat, though. I like movies a lot. However, I rarely go to see them. Despite a lot of effort, I've never learned to speak French. In spite of the fact that I play tennis regularly, I haven't improved. In order to appreciate classical music, I bought a good set of headphones. I threw out all my old books so that I could have more room at home.
We use although, though, but what is the difference? Although can be found at the beginning with a clause, subject, verb, and complementary information. Though can be found in the end, but again, after a clause. However, has the characteristic of including a period and then the comma, but again, subject, verb, and complementary information. This is not always like that. Despite doesn't have a clause. This has a noun, effort. In order to is not followed by a clause. It is followed by a verb. And so that this one, again, is used with a subject, verb, and then the complementary information. So basically, what we need to know or what we need to recognize first is that sometimes we have clauses. Sometimes.
And what about in spite of?
Okay, exactly. With the spite of, you have only noun or gerund, which is the number 3. Clause, noun, gerund, or verb. Those are the 4 types of information that we need to recognize in our sentences, because each linker has a particular situation. Not all of them can be used directly with verbs. Not all of them can be used directly with gerund, etc. So if we start with contrast, we use although, even though, and though to link 2 contrasting thoughts. Although and even though are a little more formal than simply though. Could you please help me with these 2 examples?
Even, okay, so, okay. Even though I had to study, I have to do it every evening, sorry. I hate my apartment. I love it, the neighborhood though.
All right. So as you can see with even though or although, we have the clause, subject, verb, and complement, and then the contrasting situation. We have a clause, and then comma with though in the end, because this one is informal. Let me try with this question. Although you're not thirsty, what do you always drink? So we need 2 sentences or 2 clauses. You can use the linker, the first clause, and then your answer. We know that the linker is although, so we can go with that one. Although, how can you continue?
Okay, although I'm thirsty.
I'm not
thirsty. I always drink maybe beer.
Okay. Can't blame you. Although I'm not thirsty, I always drink beer. Perfect. We are contrasting, not being thirsty and still doing this action. This is, as I mentioned previously, with although. You can emphasize with even though, or you can say it in the end. I'm not thirsty. I always drink beer, though. That would be the way. Now, if we continue, be careful to not confuse though and as though, because as though is a comparative form. It looks as though he's not here. So it looks though he's not here. However, it's also used for contrast. However, it's a slightly more formal way to say but. So the first thing to recognize is that we're gonna go from but to however, and then a comma. This is the main characteristic of this linker. You need to place period because we start a new sentence, and after however, you need to place the comma. So we're gonna go from but, which is informal, to however, that is formal. Help me with this sentence, please.
I'm not crazy about that Thai food. However, I had it last night.
So if we want to use your previous sentence, although I'm not thirsty, I always drink beer. How can you reorganize those two pieces of information using however?
For example, I'm not thirsty.
Mhm,
However,
mhm.
I always drink beer.
Yes, exactly. Just like that. Because however help us to contrast, it can be used with the same ideas that we worked previously. As you can see as well with however, we have subject, we have verb, and we have a complementary information. So far, we are only using clauses. But in spite of and despite, they have the same meaning as although, even though, and though. But what is the difference now? In spite of, or if you want to use despite, you need to use a noun or the ing form of a verb. So we're covering now number 2 and number 3. Help me with these examples, please.
In spite of her success, she's very modest.
Hmm.
Despite having many problems, he finally finished college.
In spite of, and then a noun, her success. Despite having many problems, having is the gerund form, and then the contrasting information. So if you say, I'm not thirsty, I always drink beer, how can you rephrase this information, but now including in spite of or despite?
Okay.
You can use a negative gerund as well.
In spite of, in spite of, in spite of, thirsty,
Okay,
not, not,
and then being gerund, right?
okay.
In spite of not, and the gerund idea, which is the verb be in the ing.
Okay.
In spite of not being
Thirsty.
What happens?
I always drink beer.
Just like that. As you can see in your example, I'm not thirsty is now with the gerund idea, in spite of
But
not.
for me was confused this part.
Why?
In spite of not being. Ah, okay, because the is in ing form. Okay.
Yes, you are using the verb be, but now as the subject in here or as a noun. Because it is as a noun, you need to use gerund. In spite of not being thirsty, I always drink beer. Or despite not being thirsty, I always drink beer. So we are still using the contrasting information, but now using gerund. And in your sentence, you use not, which is the negative idea of the gerund form, like in here. Could you please help me with this example?
In spite of not having very good grades, I managed to get a job.
Uh-huh. If you want to use a clause, if that's what you want to do, you can include the fact that. The fact that allows you to use the clause, despite the fact that, subject, verb, and complementary information in order to say the contrasting sentence. Despite the fact that I hate large crowds, I went out on New Year's Eve. So let's go back to your previous example. How can you say exactly the same, but now using the fact that?
Despite the fact that
Mhm,
I'm not thirsty,
mhm.
and I always drank beer.
A drink, right? In the present, I always drink.
Okay, drink.
Uh-huh. So I don't know which one is easier for you, gerund or including the fact that?
Gerund.
Gerund? Okay, well, in that way, as I mentioned previously, you are leveling up your speech as a B2 or C1 student. So that's great. That's what we need from you now. Related to contrast, do you have any final questions?
It's okay.
All right, so let's go now with propose. In this one, the vocabulary includes to and so. In order to is more formal, so that is formal. So again, you have two options, to and so informally, in order to and so that formally. Both express a purpose, a clause beginning with in order to or so that is more formal than the one beginning only with to and so. Help me with these two, please.
Okay. We've started a new program so that student can get extra training. And the other is I downloaded the song to see what everyone was talking about.
Why did you join this class?
Well, I joined this class. So I joined this class. So the class was so the class was interesting. So
remember that in this one we include now purpose. What was the purpose of joining to this class?
okay, learning.
Okay. So I joined this class. So that I.
So I learning. I'm learning.
Okay. So I learn, or as a possibility, you can also say, so that I can learn, I don't know, something new. Because we are talking about purpose, I joined this. For what reason? What was the purpose? Well, so that I can learn something new. That was the thing. We are not contrasting as we did in the previous sentence. We are just explaining or giving the reasons why we did something. So it's a different emphasis. We do not use for in a proposed clause with to or in order to. I go to the gym every day to get some exercise. As you can see, to or in order to is followed by a verb. That is the next piece of information that you need. And in that way, we covered the last one. In order to or simply to is followed by the base form of a verb. So that is followed by a clause. Help me with this too, please.
She works part-time to earn some money for her training. I took a course so that I could learn more about history.
So to plus a verb, and so that plus a clause. To make most proposed clauses negative, we simply use not. A negative auxiliary or a negative modal verb can be in that way. The negative form of in order to is in order not to. Please finish with this last example.
I always play my music softly at home, so I don't only my parents in order not to what is the pronunciation of only?
Okay, so I don't annoy
my parents in order not to annoy my parents.
Yeah, so you have two possibilities. So I don't annoy my parents, or in order not to annoy my parents. Clause, verb. So in your previous sentence, I joined this class so that I can learn something new. Let's include to or in order to. How can you modify this one, but now using in order to?
I joined this class to learn something new.
Formally, in order to. Informally, simply to.
Okay.
To learn something new. Let me put the N in here. All right. So I joined this class, the linker in this case, and then the verb, learn something new. And there you go. This is the way with linkers. Any final questions or comments?
No, it was very interesting, the class.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. And I hope to see you in the tutorials. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.